Hey guys, so in today's video I want to talk about something I wish I knew when I was in school, and in a nutshell it's basically how to become wealthy, right? Not how to become super rich, not how to become a billionaire, just how to become financially stable. How to become a millionaire, not really have to worry about your money, your finances, etc. So I think, growing up, I always thought that, just gonna let this guy pass. I always thought that you needed a really high paying job to become successful and, to get financial stability. So, in college, I was trying to become an investment banker, make 400K, and, live large, become really successful, etc. And while I think that's a really ambitious and good goal to have, I think the point of my video is that you don't necessarily need that, right? And obviously the point is not everyone is going to be able to achieve that, myself included. I wasn't really able to break into investment banking, which is fine, but not everyone's going to be able to make 300, 400K a year, right? Some people are just going to make 60K a year, 100K a year, and the point of my video is that that's perfectly fine. You can still create wealth just earning 60K a year or 100K a year. And really the three things that you have to do is, number one, you just need a stable job that pays decently, right? You don't need to make a ton of money, but just a stable job that pays you, depending on where you live, what your cost of living is, $65,000 to $100,000. So if you currently don't have a job like that, that should be your number one priority, right? Your number one priority should be, how can I get myself in a position where I can make 60K a year or 100K a year? And, I don't know a ton about this, but, I'm sure there's jobs out there that pay 60K a year. You can become a police officer somewhere, I don't know. And yeah, as far as I'm concerned, being a police officer is a pretty stable job. And, this might be obvious to a lot of people, but I'm going to say it anyway. You can't save your way to wealth if you don't have any income, right? So, of course, number one goal, earn a decent salary, right? That's going to be your driver for wealth. Number two, save as much money as you can, right? So that means cutting down on your expenses. Out of college, my first apartment, I think I was making about $75,000, and I had a 3-bedroom, 2-bath apartment in LA, and my rent was about $1,000 a month. This was back in 2019. And because it was a really small room, tiny room, I didn't have AC, it was pretty hot, but I was able to save a ton of money because I was paying $1,000 a month, right? On a $75,000 salary, yes, in theory, I could have tried to get a studio or a 1-bedroom, but I decided that I would rather save my money instead. So that's just one example. Yeah, I think for most people, your biggest expense is going to be your living expenses. If you can live at home, I would definitely encourage you to do that for the first couple years, to try to save as much money as you can. There's really no shame in living at home. I wish I had the opportunity to live at home. I would, you'd easily save like $15,000, $20,000. So yeah, that's gonna be the main expense for most people, rent. Second, try to cook as much as you can. Cooking is not, I feel like a lot of people are, for some reason, very intimidated by cooking. Cooking's not very difficult, right? Just go on YouTube, watch a simple video on some basic recipes, and you don't have to cook every single day, but even if you cook 3 days out of the week, you're gonna save a decent amount of money. Buy a rice cooker, make some rice. Chicken is very easy to make. Get some canned beans. Very simple. There's no reason why. Yeah, I've met a lot of people that were intimidated by cooking and they would eat out every single day, and that was that was weird to me. You know, like, how can you eat out every single day? You're gonna spend so much money, and I feel you get kind of tired of eating outside food. I don't know about you guys, but that's how I feel. So, yeah, try to pay as little rent as possible. Cook whenever you can, and just in general, you know, just try to keep an eye on your discretionary spend, right? Going out with friends, drinking, buying clothes. In every facet of your life, when you're spending money, you should always try to find a way to spend to spend a little bit less money. And what I mean by that is try to find alternatives to what you were initially wanting to buy. So, for example, if you're wanting to buy a really nice pair of shoes, my question to you would be, is there something that's a little bit less nicer, but significantly cheaper, right? Will you be able to live with that? And if so, then, you know, do it, right? Save the 50%, and, you know, the quality might be a little bit less, but at the end of the day, who really cares? So when it comes to clothing, this is something that, you know, there are moments where I'll spend a lot of money on clothes and moments where I'll go the cheaper route. For me personally, I have bought a lot of clothes from H&M, and it's relatively affordable. And just in my personal experience, my clothes have held up pretty well from H&M. With a couple of exceptions, like, you know, a couple of t-shirts that develop holes in them, for the most part, they're pretty decent quality, and they've lasted like at least 5 years. So even though H&M is considered fast fashion, in my experience, I feel like, you know, the quality is pretty good for me. There's also a bunch of like really you know, ways to get clothes for cheap. So for example, buying used, if you go thrifting, there's a bunch of one store that I actually really like that I have been sleeping on a lot is Ross Dress for Less. So, you know, I think Ross Dress for Less is great for if you're buying socks. They have a ton of socks on sale from like Adidas, Nike, etc. If you're looking for gym clothes, they have a bunch of stuff from, you know, the big companies like Adidas, etc. Don't know if I mentioned socks already, but yeah, socks. You know, they have a bunch of socks for cheap. Underwear, they have a ton of really cheap underwear, and it's all from big names, right? From big brands that you know maybe their inventory was too high, so they sell it to Ross, and then Ross sells it to you for less. So, you know, these are just examples of like things that you can do to really save money. And the last thing that I want to cover is, okay, you're earning a good income, you're saving a lot of money. What do you do with that money? You don't just put it in the bank, right? Because if you just put it in the bank, you're never going to be able to create true wealth doing that. You have to invest in the stock market. That is just something you have to do, right? It's not really an option. So you have to put your money into an asset that's going to continue to grow. So I highly recommend the stock market because stocks are very easy. They require very little work. Some people like to invest in real estate. I personally don't love real estate because it does require a bit of work. You know, for example, if you buy a house, you rent it out, the tenant stops paying you, that's going to be a headache. It's going to stress you out. It's going to impact your day job potentially. So I would recommend just investing in the stock market. And you know, as your portfolio grows, you gain more experience in life, then maybe you want to venture into real estate or some other assets. But the point is, do not just keep the money in your bank. It's not going to grow enough for it to really make a difference. You have to invest that money in the stock market. So I'll summarize the 3 things. Try to earn as much as you can in a stable job, save as much money as you can, and invest that extra savings. And by doing all 3 of those things, you're pretty much guaranteed to become a millionaire at some point in your life. The more money you earn, the more aggressively you invest, the faster you will become a millionaire, right? So, you know, if you're making 100K, you're investing like a significant amount of your salary, you could realistically become a millionaire by 35, right? If you start at 22. So, you know, personal finance is actually very simple. There's a ton of like content out there making things more complex than it needs to be. It's very simple, right? Ultimately, it's earn as much as you can, save as much as you can, invest. And so that's pretty much it. It's not rocket science. It's, you know, I wish I knew that in high school and college, that, you know, the stock market does really all the heavy lifting for you. So you don't necessarily need a super high stressful, super high paying job. You know, you can make a medium salary and still live a really good life. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope this was helpful. I'm going to continue to push out more personal finance content. I personally find personal finance very interesting. And I think in one of my next videos, I'll probably go over my own net worth. I am currently 29 and a half. And so I assume people will probably find it interesting to see how much money I've saved, how much I've invested, etc. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.